if you're in sexually explicit positions, but you're not naked, and then when you're not in those positions, you can be naked.
No, that's stupid. That's very stupid. I don't know why you would think that. Have you not seen movies before? There's
Yeah,
nudity and sex scenes all the time that are rated R.
no, I know, but maybe it was a different law in the 80s.
Different law? You mean like
Different
Congress got involved?
different way of life.
I finally watched. I finally watched.
I
Finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally watched.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and we finally watched Roadhouse.
We normally don't do new movies, but we're both big fans of Jake Gyllenhaal, and I don't know,
No,
looks
no,
pretty good.
no, no, no. Patrick fucking Swayze.
Stop saying it like that.
Swayze. The thing is, though, is that, and I told you this before, but I regret watching it in the order of the original Roadhouse and then the new one that just came out on Prime, and because I do this thing where it's like I'm constantly comparing it, and honestly, if I just saw the newest one first, I'd be like, that was fun. That was fun. But since I watched it in the order of the Swayze one and then the Gyllenhaal one, I was like, oh, so they completely ruined the integrity of the first one.
You're such a fucking moron. I, when you were saying, because you were telling me as you were watching these, you're like, oh man, this first one's amazing. Why
Yeah.
would they remake it? And I was like, all right, well, with this attitude, this is going to just be hilarious. Um, we're obviously just doing the original, but we did both watch similar to when we did White Man Can't Jump. We both watched the new one too, and a little bit about the new one. I liked it a lot. There were a lot of issues with it, particularly Conor McGregor just being like a fucking coked out leprechaun, like
Yeah.
as a character. Um,
He was like a James Bond villain if he was also like Jason Statham in Crash.
Crank. But
Crank.
Jason Statham in Crash just discovering how to not be racist. But if you watch the trailer, you think Conor McGregor is in 90% of the movie, but that is like every part that he is in the movie is in that trailer. He is they knew to limit his minutes in the movie, and so that part was actually pretty fine. They
What's funny too is that even having Post Malone, like his name anywhere near this, and he's in the movie at the beginning for 5 seconds, is just hilarious to me that they use Post Malone as like a way to sell this movie, and he's not even in it.
Well, I mean, we remember Training Day. How I mean, they had Snoop and Dr. Dre in that just because they also had them doing the album. They had Macy Gray. This movie, there were a lot of influencers in it, and then a lot of like young stars. Like it literally looked like Amazon was like, the way to market this is we'll get a bunch of people who were in the movie because they have social media following. So like they had Post Malone in there. Lucas Gage, who's like he was a good actor and he was great
I
in
like him.
this.
I
Yeah,
like him
yeah,
in
yeah.
this.
But so there was this one part where they just show this girl dancing in the Roadhouse after he's cleaned it up a little bit, and I recognized her as this girl on my Instagram feed who's like a really good dancer that does short reels. And
I'm telling your wife.
not they're not like seductive. She's just actually a good dancer. I'll send you some. But like they put her in the movie for 8 seconds
Yeah,
so that she would then post about it like I'm in this movie and get those people to watch the movie, which
sure.
is also funny. Like, I was watching a video today. I don't know if you know who Casey Neistat is, the
I
YouTuber.
do. I
You
do.
probably
Yeah.
fucking do. So he actually interviewed Doug Lyman
The fuck does that
because,
mean? Probably
huh?
fucking do. Probably fucking do. I don't like that.
Well, because he's like one of the more famous YouTubers, and I know you watch YouTube.
Huh.
But he's friends with Doug Lyman, the director of this movie, and Doug
Yeah.
Lyman had a huge feud with Amazon because they decided to just have this streaming instead of putting it in theaters, which it doesn't make any sense to me, like, why Amazon would do that, because Amazon has, like, people have Amazon for the free shipping, and I know they're doing the no ads for an extra $3 a month thing, and I assume that's only gonna get worse with how much money they're gonna try and charge for that.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know, like, to me, when I think of, like, the streaming services I have, I don't even think of Amazon as one, because it's like I was paying for it before. I mean, it's just like a thing you have or you don't. Like, I don't think it's someone's gonna get drawn to the service because of Roadhouse.
Oh, you never know. The thing. So let's get back more on
Well,
like the
hold on.
plot.
I was making a whole point about the, like, the Amazon, the design around this was to just bring in viewers by having a bunch of, like, different random people, like, "Oh, I wanna go see it for this girl that dances," or, "I wanna go see it because, Post Malone is in the opening." And, like, that was actually kind of my main gripe with the movie, is that it was, like, more concerned with getting people in the seats than if it would make the movie good, is what it
So
felt like.
So I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And the movie was shit as far as like being a movie, right? But like it was entertaining. So in that regard, I was like, all right, am I like just watching this and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, sure. But like, am I watching this being like, wow, what a what a masterpiece? No way, right?
But
My biggest gripe of the movie is that they keep referencing the original in little ways that are just like horrible to the original.
like what?
Like, okay, calling it the Roadhouse. Okay, first of all, you have it set in the Florida Keys. And I totally thought that going and watching the Patrick Swayze movie that it was called that the Roadhouse was called the Roadhouse. And then it's funny because when I realized I was like Double Deuce, nah, whatever. I was like disappointed it's not called the Roadhouse. And then in this one it's called the Roadhouse, but I was like, don't do that. And then the other one, it was like in the original, they were like, yeah, he's a guy you hire. He's kind of like what's the guy from Bar Rescue? Taffer, right? From Bar Rescue. You hire him to make your bar better, but like with a focus on security and the bouncers. And in this one, he's just a bouncer. So you don't have any of that, like, oh, he's teaching them how to become a better business. And I really miss that in this one. And so when you have him being like, oh, take taking the first fight outside and then how those gang members describe him to the boss, he's like, he was just really polite and nice in the beginning. I don't get it, but it's referencing to Patrick Swayze being like, always be nice. So it's like references like that, but they just don't hit.
I don't know. I think the movie was basically, if you had just called it something else, like, there wouldn't really be an issue, right? Like, I don't think it wasn't a direct remake. It's not even like, this guy's not a cooler. It's not what he does for work. It's just a guy who's down on his luck who, like, goes to work at a roadhouse. Um, I the thing about this is, like, you're like, oh, it's not like a masterpiece. It's just like an enjoyable movie. It's shit as a movie, and I'm like, I don't know, man. If you think Roadhouse the original is a masterpiece, like,
No, no, no. I don't think Roadhouse the original is a masterpiece, but I do think it has some charm that this one loses.
I mean, I don't know. I'm sort of all in on Jake Gyllenhaal. Like, I just think he's, like, amazing, and, like, listening to him talk, like, I don't know, he has that, like, effect for me.
This is the last thing I'll say about it on my end. Is that Roadhouse the original obviously had a way to tie up the film and end it, but this is so obvious trying to have a series about it. The fact that he doesn't get with the girl doctor, she tells him to leave, which was an option for Dr. Clay in the original, right? But she wanted him to stay. So this girl, she tells him to leave along with her father. He gets on the Greyhound bus and supposedly makes like the town of Glass Key a better place as he leaves. Like you see that in the people, right? But then you're like, okay, he's going to the next, I don't know, town and whatever state to make it better. Like you could see that they're trying to set up either a series or a sequel for this.
I The only thing I would say about the ending, and I actually have a problem with both endings, I thought it would have been cool is if he got thrown in jail purposely to go kill the father, or at the very least just like have some line in there about how, oh, the father's in there forever, so that's like never going to be an issue.
Yeah.
Um Going to the original, you know, you hear about this movie and you're like, oh, this movie's a cult classic. And that's what I had in my mindset going into it. For the first hour and 20 to hour and 30 minutes, I was like, this is just actually like a good movie. I don't really understand. It's kind of got like a low metascore. There was like, people who were like, oh, it's entertaining. It's like, it's cheese and whatever. I was like, for the first
Yeah.
75%, I was like, this is actually just like better than most 80s movies to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the ending is so fucking wild
Yeah.
that I'm like, I don't even understand how to describe it. The exact ending, the way Brad's story is concluded, which by the way, you're just calling your main villain Brad the whole time, which I thought was odd. Like, I think you need a better name for that person.
It's Brad Wesley
I
to
get
you.
it. And I call him Brad. We're on a first name. But that ending is just, it didn't ruin the movie, but it did take it from a level where I was like, this is just a fucking, like, this is an actually great movie. It's got some great stuff in it. Like, I don't really understand, to like, okay, this is a cheesy movie that I like, actually, I still really enjoy it. But the ending is so out there to me, just like the choice they made on how to finish this. I'd say starting with when he pulled that dude's throat out.
I fuck guys like you in prison.
Let's also talk about the gay allegory that this movie clearly is.
Um, yeah, this is a very homoerotic movie. I mean, incredibly, like, I think there's a running joke in society that like 80s movies with these big sweaty hunky action star guys have like a homoeroticism toward to it, right? I think that's no secret. Um, but in this movie, there's something definitely about it that was like, in some scenes more than most. And it was always with Jimmy. And I was like, something's up with Jimmy. And then when he said that line, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. And I'm thinking, did he have a thing with Brad? Maybe.
So let's get to the beginning, because there's throughout I just made notes of lines that, like, if Quentin Tarantino had gone off on this movie instead of Top Gun, when I watched it, I would have been like, oh, no, yeah, absolutely. So it starts in this bar in what I think is LA. When it opens, like going into the bar, it's a bunch of cut shots, and I was just thinking, I was like, oh, PTA would have done this as a oneer. You know what I mean? So we meet Dalton, and we meet him with some guy starting trouble in this club. And the guy says to him, this is the first line where I like wrote it down word for word. Okay, Dalton, I've always wanted to try you. I think I could take you.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
that's not double entendre, I don't know what is. And this man just wanted sex, and Dalton throws him out of his club, and I don't really understand that. You know what I mean? Like, you could turn him
On a
down
more
nicer.
serious note, the way that Dalton handles all of these problematic guys is awesome. I wish I had the temperament to do how like Dalton does. And it's great, and it sets this character up being like, okay, this is the type of character he is, right? He's real calm, cool, collected guy, and he deals with problems, head on, but in a smart and skillful manner. And then to me, when you get to the end of the film where he's pushed him, right? He's pushed him. And I think the way they did it in the Jake Gyllenhaal version was horrible, because I just didn't get that at all. I was like, I guess he has this backstory about this match. He killed his friend or whatever. By the way, worst part of the movie was whenever cutting back to MMA fighting. Anyways, so the the Swayze movie, I think, also did a bad job where they were like, oh, now you're at the end of the movie. Oh, I'm gonna lose it. And I was like, eh. It would have been cool to see a little bit of that throughout.
Well, okay. I don't know if you just didn't watch properly, but in the Swayze version, they stabbed his best friend in the heart as he was trying to leave town. And in the Gyllenhaal version, he's leaving town, and then the like person he's closest to in the town, this little girl, they burned her store down. And he goes up to the guy and he's like, I was gonna leave, and you fucked up. And then he decides, now you've made it my problem. Now, like, I would have liked him to go like check on her in the hospital, maybe, but I mean, like I said, both endings have problems. We next get the owner of the Double Deuce who comes in and is propositioning him to move to Missouri to take care of his club. 5K down and then 500 a night plus medical expenses, which I that like Gyllenhaal is not really getting that much. You know what I mean? He's getting 5K a week, so he got 5,000 down, 3,500 a week. With inflation, Gyllenhaal could probably do a little better.
I think Gyllenhaal was more desperate than Swayze though. Like Swayze does this for a job, and Jake Gyllenhaal was just like, "I'm literally doing nothing. Sure, I'll do this."
Well, also he like almost commits suicide and then is like, "Fuck, now I actually really need the
What did
money."
you think about that scene with the train?
I think like a lot of points made in the movie were a little ham-fisted, and we should probably stop going back and forth. But like, I don't know. I thought it was a little much, but I also think like, I mean, it does establish like, hey, this guy is completely like down on his luck. I mean, we eventually find out about the MMA thing, although it's alluded to like the entire time. Um, I don't know. I mean, I didn't take the movie that seriously having watched the first one. So like I, I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
had fun with it. Um he then decides he's gonna take this job. I like he walks by like what I think is a homeless guy and just hands him the keys to this car. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing there? First of all, I don't no paperwork
Hey,
involved.
I ain't no valet.
By the way, that's the same garage from 48 Hours, which is a movie you haven't seen.
Uh,
Um So he gives the guy his car. I do like the way this ties together. It's one of the points in the movie where it's like, oh, this is actually fairly well written. Is that he gives that guy his car and then he goes and picks up another car. And I was like, why is he? I don't know. Why is he hiding his car? And then he goes to town, immediately buys a new car, a piece of shit, goes to a junkyard to buy tires. Like, what is he doing? And then after
yeah,
the first night, you see his window broken in and all of his tires slashed. I was like, that is like beautifully written because it's like it's so odd in the beginning that you actually track it, and then when it all connects, you're like, that's just kind of amazing writing.
yeah, yeah, and it actually has a lot of that. I love my favorite part of the whole movie, dude, was the beginning where he goes in and he's just observing. He's just watching people,
He's like, this isn't
and
my first day.
yeah, yeah.
Let's
I'm
start
not on
tonight.
the I'm not on the clock yet. But he just watches people. He sees the problematic people. He sees um the people who have potential. And then he goes around on his first day and then he just starts firing everyone and promoting the good people. And then he goes around again on the second night and then keeps firing people. But then of course, and I love how this ties into the rest of the story, is he fires the wrong guy, right? He fires the
Hmm.
bartender. The bartender is the nephew in law of the main villain of the story. So you get that, which doesn't seem like he really cared about him, but I guess he did.
Well, it was his sister's sort of an obligation. The other thing with observing too is like he meets Morgan, and like you can kind of tell like Morgan has the exact opposite temperament of him. The way this movie started, just showing Patrick Swayze dealing with a couple of guys, and you're like, oh right, we're gonna get a fight right off, and you don't, but it establishes who this guy is and like
Yeah.
what he's going to instill in the rest of these guys.
Yeah.
um there is also, he goes up to the blind guitar player singer, and he says something, and the guy's like immediately like, thought you'd be bigger, which like everyone says to him, which is also a very homoerotic line.
Also does not work with the Jake Gyllenhaal because Jake is fucking huge in his movie.
So cut, just
And I love like everyone under this is another thing, right? Is that I just love about the first one is that Patrick Swayze is meant to be underestimated every turn throughout the movie, and he just fucking kicks ass. And there's something really satisfying about that. And but literally, Jake Gyllenhaal walks into a room to fight Post Malone, and if that sentence was never uttered before,
Mhm.
but he walks into a room to fight Post Malone, who I guess was undefeated that night 9 times in a row or 6 times in a row,
Yeah.
and was going in for the seventh. and Post Malone sees him, recognizes him. He takes off his shirt, cut as hell, and Post is like, "Nah, I'm out." And I just kind of it's just like he's an intimidating guy, I guess, but it just kind of ruins the whole point of Roadhouse.
I don't. You're so fucking annoying about this because it's like you don't want a straight just shot for shot remake, but the things it changes, you're like, well, that's not Roadhouse.
Just keep the
A
integrity.
movie you saw 3 days ago. Just shut the fuck up. You're
I
not even
love
like
it.
you didn't see it when you were a
I,
kid.
I love it.
Oh
They
my
call
god.
it. They should have called it Rough House.
Oh my god. I did like in the beginning after he takes the money from Post Malone and the guy comes out. You cost me $500, and he stabs him and he's like, "Did you think this through?" And the guy just walks away. He's like, "Do you want your knife?" The other thing that's great in the first night is when the guy is just has his girl there and he's like, "Doesn't she have some great tits? $10 to kiss him." And the guy's like, "Oh man," he's just feeling him up. And he's like, "Are you gonna kiss him or not?" "I can't. I don't have $10."
Yeah. Yeah, I think that initiates the first big bar fight of the movie, right?
It does, yeah. And he once again, I don't think really participates. So then after this, he goes and gets the car, gets the tires. He rents a room, and this is about when I stopped and I was like, "Oh yeah, there's this rich asshole who I guess is like the B plot." And you're like, "Oh yeah, the B plot," which is in a movie like this, there was no B plot. It just all connects. I
Well,
like to,
the B plot is Dr. Clay. I think the romantic plot was the B plot.
I get, but that also just directly connects to the A plot because
Of course,
she's the.
I don't like how they dated. I don't like that at all. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why would she ever go for someone like that? It kind of like, I don't know. And then
Have you fucking seen Patrick Swayze
what? No,
with that hair?
Why would Dr. Clay go for Brad Wesley ever?
Oh, I mean, at that point, she's younger and he like controls the town. So it was unclear though in the movie, right? Because people were like, "Oh, they had a thing," and then the blind guitar player's like, "He was sweet on her," and then she said, "I had an ex husband." Was that Brad or was that
Yeah.
another guy?
Is that another guy? She slut? I don't know.
Fucking hell.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But so anyways, in the bar, so we're introduced to a lot of people, right? We're introduced to the younger bouncers. We're introduced to the waitress who I recognize from Gilmore Girls, but I don't know her name. Um, like the one with the little bob cut who like gives them breakfast in the morning, and then she's so sweet, she's so nice, and I don't understand this from Dalton's, like at a character perspective. She tracks him down on where he's running the room. She brings him coffee and breakfast. She's like, "I brought you coffee and breakfast," and he's like, he rolls his eyes and he's like, "Oh Jesus Christ, like go away." I'm like, she's super sweet.
I think because
What?
he just doesn't like to deal with people. Like he's kind of a little bit of a loner. I mean, the new movie plays up like his past of like killing someone. In this movie, it's like much more subtle the way like we kind of find out about it. It doesn't seem to be affecting him that much. Just sort of in moments he thinks about it. Um, and there is like the nice subtle line of like, "Oh, I like this place because the horses warn me if danger's coming," because he is like he knows like the shit he does is dangerous. So he goes back the next day. He's in charge. He fires Morgan, and he's like, "You're dead." Do you think Morgan was also like on Brad's payroll, or did he just go to Brad after this because he's like, "I got nothing else to do"?
That one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way the movie makes it seem. Um, and then he comes up with his 3 rules: never underestimate an opponent, always take it outside, and be nice until it's not time to be nice. And what if he calls my mom a whore? Is she?
I love that too, because he's like, words are just words, but and they go, "Well, when is the time not to be nice?" And he goes, "I'll let you know." And very quickly that night, it's like when a guy pulls a knife on you, I guess. Like, I mean, it's kind of obvious what he means by that. So
So here's another moment. It's a very subtle one. I don't know if you missed it, but he goes in for that next night and he goes up to the bar and he asks the bartender for coffee. And the bartender smiles at him and says, "Leaded or unleaded?" And the way Patrick Swayze smiles at him, I thought like something was going to happen between those two.
There is a moment that I kept thinking at any given moment, Patrick Swayze is gonna like kiss Sam Elliott.
Miho.
I,
I
I love where he's dancing with Dr. Clay, and then Patrick Swayze is like, everything he's saying is a lie, and he he's just talking his friend up, right? And
Well,
he
he's also
leans.
saying like, "I want to bang you."
I mean, dude, have you seen Dr. Clay?
I was honestly,
You're
holy shit,
checking
yeah.
out you you were checking out the big titted blonde from the bar, right?
I don't know why you talk this way about these lovely women. So
Oh, right. Respectfully, big titted
I like
blonde.
how the one guy lets the underage girl in. Underage, I don't know what underage means. Like under 21 or how underage was, because he's then banging her in the back. And the most romantic of lines, "You're going to be my regular Saturday night."
Old enough to kiss.
And then he's like, you're fired." He's like, "I'm on my break. Stay on your break."
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
The I think it has to be, right? I mean, she's under 21, but she's over 18, or else they wouldn't do that to us. It's the audience? Innocent audience?
I
Nah.
don't know.
The amount of breasts in this movie is amazing. I did not expect it. First of all, I didn't even look at the rating. I didn't know it was like hard R. But the thing is that is that he looks out, and kind of like a creeper moment from Dalton, but he looks out over the lake, and Brad Wesley is having this huge party, and it's just all these topless women.
Yeah, yeah. Apparently, I think the producer was able to make that happen, like to get all those women to come there that wanted to be naked on film. Is
I
what I
didn't know
read.
they came there also.
Just fucking you're in a mood tonight. So, um, the night ends, and the owner, who like we barely talk about, the owner in this movie the whole time was like, is he gonna be a bad guy? And he never is, but he just has that vibe about him that I was like, he's gonna be the bad guy in this.
It's interesting because, when you go to like a sleazy nightclub and you have a sleazy owner, he's the sleazy owner, but he's not a threat, he's not a villain, he's just sleazy.
Yeah. So he says, "Oh, we had a good night," and Dalton says, "It's going to get, worse before it gets better." And then after this is when Denise, is her name, played by Julie Michaels, comes over, and she's like, "You shouldn't have fired the bartender," but she will not explain why. And then you see the rich guy who like flew the plane over the farm, then almost runs Dalton off the road.
Yeah.
Uh, and then we finally meet Dr. Clay's uncle, who we do not know is the uncle at the time, and uh he has some very funny lines. He's like,
So just to explain, Red's role is he's the it's a mechanic shop, but it's also like a feed store and like a general store, right? A small town general store.
yeah,
Yeah, that he runs like right next to the Double Deuce.
it's a small town. He's like, I was gonna leave this town too once, but I married an ugly woman. Don't do that. It takes the energy right out of you.
Really hard for me to believe, looking at Dr. Clay, that
Well,
anyone related to her is an ugly woman.
that was a niece, so it could happen. um the bartender shows back up with a couple other muscle guys. The one fatter guy looked like Walter Hauser from Black Klansman.
Yes, yes.
Like that's his uncle,
I like the
Paul
other guy
Walter Paul
too.
Walter Hauser. Yeah.
The other guy is just like a fucking lawyer that is like not expecting to like start throwing punches.
And they're like, yeah, Brad Wesley controls the liquor in this town. And so I expected like, oh, at some point, they're just going to not be able to get liquor, but it did not seem that hard for them
They
to
just
like
called a
fix
guy.
that issue. The way they dealt with that was a little weird to me. So they have a fight. He gets stabbed a little bit, but they kind of beat the shit out of these guys. It's a really good fight. And then this is when he meets Dr. Clay. And without sounding too lecherous, I've never seen Kelly Lynch before in a movie, and like I don't understand why I was not told about this part of the
Right.
movie. Like
Yeah.
you before you were like, "Oh, have you met his love interest yet?" I was like, "You mean the hot blonde at the bar that's like staring at him?" Is like, you just said you'll know, and then like 5 minutes later when I'm watching the movie, it's like Dr. Clay.
Yeah, man. And we see her full nude, having a sex scene with
I don't know why this is all you want to talk about right now, but I will say, and we always talk about the way nudity is filmed in movies because I find it interesting. But she is filming an entire sex scene, no nudity shown whatsoever, not even a hint really.
yeah.
And then after the sex is over, you then see the nudity, which is very odd. I did read though that um she had to have padding on her back because the way he was slamming her against the wall like was painful or could have hurt her. And
Buckle up, Buttercup. But the
we
thing is that I wonder too if in her contract, or maybe it's just a way to keep the rating down, right? Is that if you're in sexually explicit positions, but you're not naked, and then when you're not in those positions, you can be naked.
no, that's stupid. That's very stupid. I don't know why you would think that. Have you not seen movies before? There's
Yeah,
nudity and sex scenes all the time that are rated R.
no, I know, but maybe it was a different law in the 80s.
Different law? You mean like
Different
Congress got involved?
different way of life.
So we normally
Yeah.
do alternate casting at the end, but I found this one interesting. Originally, Annette Bening had the Dr. Clay part, and it
Oh.
was Kelly Lynch said that she was replaced because they didn't have chemistry. Annette Bening and Patrick Swayze. I don't know, what the truth of that part of it is, but that would have been very interesting, like a very interesting change.
Yeah, maybe it's more like a Contact, Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster, like
What does that mean?
that kind of non-existent chemistry.
I don't know what you're saying. I literally don't know what you're saying.
Because I don't think in Contact, Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster had a lot of chemistry.
I think they were supposed to kind of not. Like she doesn't seem to be very interested. Oh, I guess I don't know. In the middle, I kind of forgot about Contact. So we are next at, he is talking to her. We find out that he studied philosophy at NYU. I think this is the first time we hear about this.
Yeah.
And he tells her to come to the Double Deuce for a cup of coffee. And then we get the "thought you'd be bigger" line. I do like the fact that he carries his medical chart around. Like she needs to know about all of his injuries, and then he's just like, yeah, I'm prepared. It saves time. Next, we go to Brad's, where he makes the fat guy and the skinny lawyer apologize, and he doesn't believe O'Connor, the skinny lawyer's apology, so he hits him in the face. I gotta say, I mean, I think Ben Gazzara, who plays Brad Wesley, is a good actor. I feel like you could have had a more intimidating person in that role.
That's kind of how I felt about the villain in the new one. But what's funny about him is that he's like, because they made him a bit younger and they made the dad like the ominous presence in the whatever, but because they made him a bit younger, it was more believable for him to be more like unhinged.
Well, and so really in the new one, Conor McGregor is supposed to be the one you fear. And I guess in this one, it's sort of Jimmy who is supposed to be that, but also Brad is painted as this kind of imposing, dangerous figure. Like his guys are afraid of him
Yeah, but you
because of
also
the
have,
power.
because of the implication. Um but the thing is too is like in the new one he had this kind of lackey like Jimmy that was constantly on his side, that's like, your dad's not gonna like this, and like always the one that Jake Gyllenhaal like collapses his throat in, right, and then drowns him.
Yeah.
But it was so weird because it's almost like they took one character and split him three ways in the new one.
Yeah. I don't know, you had like a lot of henchmen in the new one, which I really liked the funny one who at the end
Yeah,
was
the
like,
broken arm
guys,
one.
they don't
Yeah,
even tell me anything. I'm gonna leave. And then Jake Gyllenhaal starts walking away. He's like, thank you for the nonviolence.
he
He
is.
he's like great in kind of everything I see him in. He sort of plays a very similar like character.
Yes,
Um,
stay in your lane.
stay in your lane. So next he goes back to Reds and he figures out that Brad is taking a 10% cut, but he's doing it legally through this Jasper Improvement Society. And then after this, Dalton calls Wade Garrett, played by Sam Elliott, and he's sort of feeling unsure about this whole situation. And like he tells him it's fine, but Wade eventually shows up, and so which I knew he was going to show up, obviously, because you don't have Sam Elliott playing that or not. When you have Sam Elliott playing that part, I was like, is he brought in to be like a fun guy to fight, or is he brought in for some gravitas because someone has to die? And it's obviously the
You really
latter.
thought that? You really thought that? I thought like another really like well written part of the movie that was towards the end was almost like the scene from The Dark Knight that Brad Wesley is Two-Face and he's like, I'm gonna flip a coin and one of them will die. And you see Sam Elliott come into the bar with like the absolute shit beat out of him, but he's alive. So you have to think that it's Dr. Clay that's gonna get the boot. And he goes to Dr. Clay, and she's fine. Dude, that reveal when he goes back, I was like, oh my God. They're all dead.
I actually thought that was going to happen too when he leaves him there. Because you can't kill the love interest. That's not gonna fly. So
Well, they did in The Dark Knight.
that was for other reasons. So next we get Denise hitting on him, and Jimmy gets her out of the way. I can't tell, is she Brad's girl or Jimmy's girl? I guess Brad's girl, or is she just a girl
Both.
that stays at the house that
I don't think Jimmy has a girl, if you know what I'm saying.
possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. I kind of agree. And this is a big fight where some guys come in a huge truck. This is like there are like a ton of henchmen Brad has, or different like groups he sends, and they sort of see it from a mile away and just like kick them out. And to your point about like Dr. Clay being interested in him, she's like kind of in a high school way impressed by this fight, like, ooh, big strong man. And then they go to a diner after this. And there's this line at the end, I'm going to leave before you think I'm a nice guy. And she's like, I know you're not a nice guy. It's like, because she wants a taste of the wildlife.
She wants a bad boy.
She does. Next, he gets summoned to Brad's, which I love in the update when the guy tries to get him to come to the boss. And he's like, nah. He's like, I have a gun. He's like, yeah, but it's in your waistband. So it's not really too intimidating.
And then to entice him to pull it out. And as he's trying to pull it out, he's walking closer and closer to him. And he's like, all I have to do is break your middle and index finger, and you won't be able to hold the gun. Well,
Well, you
you'll
can
be able
hold
to
it.
hold the gun, but you won't
You
be able
can't
to
shoot
shoot it. Yeah. And then the other guy who runs out of the car, he's like, where's your gun? He's like, I think I left it in the car.
That movie's just a very fun movie.
Yeah, no, there's no issue with that movie. I wish it wasn't called Roadhouse.
Well, you're the problem. So he gets summoned to Brad's, and Brad's like, what would it take for you to work for me? And he said, no amount of money in the world would I work for you. And like, as he was walking in, he sees Denise with a black eye, which is
Yeah.
like part of the reason he's like, go fuck yourself. We're next at the Double Deuce, or the Roadhouse, and it finally has like really good clientele. Keith David is a bartender.
Yeah, dude. Hold on. One thing before we get into that. The cage is finally down from the bandstand.
Yeah, you don't need it no more.
Yeah. Keith David is a bartender.
So he was apparently supposed to have a bigger role. It's not Denise. Is not the one. Oh yeah, Denise is the one who gets hit. So what's
Yes,
the other?
Denise.
Yeah, what's the other girl's name? Carrie? Is
Yeah, but
Carrie the singing girl?
yeah.
Okay, well I got that confused. Yeah, Carrie is the girl that sings who showed up. Um, Keith David and the girl that plays Carrie, and I think like all those characters were supposed to have like more in the movie, and so they for I guess the original cut of this was like 3 hours and 20 minutes, so they had to trim quite a bit to get it down. So we're at the point where they discover that they don't have liquor coming in, and Dalton says that he will take care of it. And then the doctor shows up, and the bad guys see, and they say dig a hole. And I was like, I don't
Yeah.
know what the fuck that means. And she goes over to his place, She's looking pensively at Brad's, and I was like, oh, that's the ex-husband, which they never say that's the ex-husband in this movie. Um, and then they have sex. They then go outside onto the roof and are talking, and Brad is watching as they then go in for round two.
Oh, they don't go in. They stay on the roof for round two.
That's what I meant, go in physically. So, and then the next day, he finds Dalton finds out from the blind guitar player that Brad had a thing for her.
So I do want to ask about this. So the blind guitar player and Dalton obviously know each other from the past. Um, and I take it because, like Dalton, his band tours around different roadhouses and bars, right?
Yeah,
What I'm confused about is how the fuck does this guy know so much about this one location?
the guitar player.
Yeah.
Oh, just people talking to him. That's why he doesn't know exactly everything. He's like, oh, I've heard. Just like he's just a guy that
Yeah.
is friends with him. It is interesting. This movie like creates this whole world that I don't know exactly exists to this extent, right? But like that there's like, oh, everyone's heard of Dalton. He's this guy that fixes bars all across the country. Like especially in the '80s, that just seems odd.
The fact that he doesn't have his own TV show. Yeah.
Does does the guy from Bar Rescue kick the shit out of people? Like, why do you keep bringing it up?
Actually, did I ever tell you about the time I was on an
Yes, you
episode of
did.
Bar Rescue?
You
Okay.
did.
All
Yeah,
right.
you brought it up several times.
Okay.
So now Garrett shows up, and I got to say that I think there are two spin-off movies that could have been made about this. First, from the time Patrick Swayze drove from LA and made it to the Double Deuce, I feel like there's a good cross-country movie in there.
With who?
Just like random places he stops, hotels and such, people he gets to beat up people. And like, oh, why did it take you 2 weeks to get to the Double Deuce? He's like, you don't want to know. And then the second movie is Sam Elliott should have had his own Roadhouse movie.
That I agree with. Actually, I thought you were going to say in one of the options, and I think it's going to be better than your road trip movie idea, is that once Dalton like feels good about leaving the Double Deuce in the right hands, I want to see those young bouncers just fucking beat up people all day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of see the young bouncers in the new one just beat up people. And I mean, I think they're going to. So he then takes him to meet Dr. Clay. Oh, dude, I almost skipped over the best fucking fight in the world. Garrett shows up as Patrick Swayze is getting the shit kicked out of him in the back by like some huge dudes who are like breaking all the liquor. And the tall guy says to Sam Elliott, "You want to fight dickless?" And his line, "I sure ain't showing you my dick," as he punches him in the dick, is masterful.
Yeah.
It's one of my
great.
favorite lines in the movie.
I also love when Sam Elliott saves him from getting the shit kicked out of him, and he's like, "I had it."
Well, also because he lets him get hit several times before he stops. It's not like he sees it and runs up and starts grabbing arms. He just walks out and he's like, "Mijo."
Yeah. Yeah.
So he takes him immediately to meet Dr. Clay because he's like, "Look what I landed. Like a doctor that looks like that." And fucking Garrett's like, "Holy shit." And they go out drinking, and then they go out dancing at basically a Waffle House. And he says, "I want you to myself." That scene's a little odd to me. Like it's definitely not a scene that flies today because it feels a little like women or property type thing. Like, oh, go dance with my friend. Like, I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way. Like the way he treated her just felt odd to me.
I was okay with it. And I think we get a really good little backstory and more flesh out the Dalton character about him killing a guy in the past and how he's not okay with it. And I love Sam Elliott's like reasoning. He basically just get over it, man. Like he was gonna kill you. You did what you had to do. You know what else would you do if a guy pulled a gun on you? And you learn how he kills him. And he rips his esophagus out of his throat.
Yeah.
Which the new one, much better, is just you just break the trachea and you break the airways and you just drown the guy, right? In pool water. But he rips the guy's throat And here is, I think, the transition between it being a really good movie and a cheesy fuckfest is that when you have that fight with Jimmy on the water after burning down the barn, he rips Jimmy's throat out. And Dr. Clay witnesses it, and she's like disgusted by it. Which is different from the new one, because when the doctor sees him kill Conor McGregor, she's like, okay, cool.
She tells him to leave.
Yeah, but like for his safety.
I don't know. I don't even know if they banged. Although on that sandbar, that would probably be nice. So Reds gets burned down and explodes. I don't know what caused that explosion like that. It's just the 80s.
Yeah,
Just shit exploded.
gasoline.
Yeah. And then yeah, but like the explosion part of it, I know the fire was caused by gasoline probably. And then they go back into the Double Deuce, and basically everyone is left except Brad and his henchmen show up, and a couple patrons who didn't get the memo to get the fuck out. And they start fighting, and then Jimmy gets in the middle with a pool cue. None of the guys can take Jimmy. Not 3, not 4 guys can take Jimmy. And then Jimmy looks over at Garrett and says, "I want your ass."
Yeah.
That's what he says to Garrett.
Yeah.
And Garrett is getting his ass handed to him by Jimmy until Dalton steps in. And we're getting a little taste of the final fight. But then Brad just shoots a gun in the air to stop things. He's like, not yet. We're not that part of the movie. That's a little odd. It's good though. It also like kind of shows you that, you know, in the beginning, the owner of the Double Deuce is like, I don't want Garrett. He's a little past his prime. And you can tell like Garrett could not have handled this situation on his own the way Patrick Swayze has.
No, of course. Yeah. And so they leave, and you have that moment where you know shit's gonna go down. Like as a viewer, you were like, okay, this movie's coming to a head. Something horrible is gonna happen. And then he receives that call from Brad, who's like, one will live, one must die.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did have a little bit of like shit that happens before that. So like he goes to Red's house as Red's moving, and all the other people are like, "Why are you leaving? You know, this is our
Oh
chance."
yeah, you're right. Uh-huh.
And then the Double Deuce owner's like, I think Brad's scared," and Patrick Swayze's like, "No, he's fucking not," and he really isn't. Like Brad has this unbelievable, because of the power he wields, like just this unfaltering view of himself as like untouchable.
Yep.
Because then in the next scene, Brad has a monster truck ran through a dealership. And this is the fatal flaw that most people with power make when they're questioned, like in these scenarios, is they just take it a little too far. And first of all, like you're fucking up your own business because you're taking 10% of a guy who now can't really sell cars because you fucked his dealership up.
But I like the so when they're like, it's like the town leaders, I guess, or the older folks, that the business owners of the town, and the car dealer guy to Red was like, you know, like it's just you have insurance, right? Like just get the claim, get over it, build again, just, you know, move on with your life. But then when his dealership is ruined by the monster truck, I love Red turning to him and goes, "You got insurance, right?" Like
Yeah.
it's no big deal when it happens to some other guy, but like you understand the gravitas of the situation now.
So at this point, Garrett tells him he needs to get out of here, and he's like, "You can leave whenever you fucking want." And then he throws a punch at Garrett, and Garrett catches it. And it you feel like the movie just like needs him to leave, right? Because for plot purposes.
Of
And
course.
then Dr. Clay shows up, and she also wants him to leave. And then there is an explosion at the farmhouse. He goes to save the guy, kicks the door in. We haven't even talked about the kicks because there's been a lot of good ones. But the kicking the door in, so unnecessary, but so great. Pulls the guy out, then sees Jimmy on the bike
catches up to Jimmy on the bike.
Well, he took the right angle. You know what I mean? He went this way as Jimmy was riding by, like he perfected it. Apparently, Patrick Swayze did a lot of his own stunts and wanted to do the stunt of knocking the guy off the bike, and they were just like, "No fucking way, can you do that?" Um, and then this is just a great fight. First of all, it
Mhm.
starts with Jimmy saying, "Prepare to die," and then Swayze's response, "You were such an asshole."
Yeah. Yeah.
Dalton is bad at trash talk.
He is. That line I remember being kind of jolted by. I was like, "Oh, that's not what I thought he
You're
was going to
so
say at
you're
all."
so mean, Jimmy. Why are you so mean? And then the line, "I used to fuck guys like you in prison," which apparently was like one of the producers showed up and was like, "That should be the line." Um, but that just lends more credence to my theory.
I
So
also like if you pay attention to the way Patrick Swayze looks at him when he says that, like almost like Patrick Swayze did not realize the producer asked him to say that. It's like, whoa, what?
so they're fighting. It's going one way, going the other. Dalton gets the upper hand and he pulls a gun, kicks the gun out of his hand, and we don't even really get to see the way he pulls the throat out. It's so quick. Later on, when he's gonna do it to Brad, it's kind of the same hand hold.
As in Kill Bill?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
but that's with a heart. That's the five-finger death touch. That is not the throat pulling out.
I'm pretty sure if your throat is pulled out, that's also a death touch.
Dr. Clay seems to be upset with him that he killed the guy who shot at him. I don't really understand.
Who shot at him? Who burned the farmhouse down?
Burned her
Who
uncle's shop down.
burned her uncle's shop down? I
So
don't know. I
then
mean, she's forgiving, I guess.
Patrick Swayze throws the body into the water, and then in more bad trash talk, Wesley,
Wesley!
fuck you.
Yeah.
And then next, Brad calls him and said, "Wade or Elizabeth, one of them dies. I'm gonna flip a coin." Garrett walks in beat up, so he immediately is like, "Okay, he's gonna go kill Clay." Goes, tells her she's going with him. She says, "I'm not going anywhere." Goes back to the double deuce. It was tails. And there is an interesting thing with the knife where he takes the knife with him, uses the knife to have the car go by itself, and the guys all shoot it up. When this car stops, they open the door. A dude pulls the knife out and puts it back in his sheath that like
Yeah.
perfectly fits that knife. So he's the guy that killed Garrett. So when Patrick Swayze comes up against that guy, takes the knife and says, "It's tails again," as he stabs him in the heart, which
Yeah,
is
it's
pretty
pretty
great.
awesome. It's pretty great. It's awesome. My only gripe is that you can see the stunt driver in the car as they're all shooting at him.
Dude, it's the 80s, man. What do you want? I will say that like the way this movie is shot, like the music all feels like a horror movie, but like like the revenge portion of a horror movie.
I can
Like
see
it's
that, yeah.
really played up. The music is very intense.
Well,
Uh,
it's also like it turns into a whole different type of movie too. Like all of a sudden you have the predator fucking stalking his prey. The guy turns every corner and finds a dead body just sitting there, right? And then finally you end up in the trophy room where you have the polar bear squish the guy. Um
I love he kind of laughs as he knocks the polar bear over him. And then I will say that um the acting from Ben Gazzara when he is in the room sort of talking shit, looking for Swayze with the gun, you can sort of hear him getting more and more nervous. It's like starts in like very calm and like he's in control, and then as he's searching more and more and can't find him. This should not have been a fight though. There's in no world should he have been able to even come close to dealing with Patrick Swayze in this last scene. And he sort of holds his own for a very short bit before Patrick Swayze gets the upper hand, is about to do the throat thing, and decides not to. Dr. Clay runs in, says no because Brad is going to shoot. And then all the townspeople just show up with shotguns and just keep shooting him.
I love it.
Fucking wild.
I love it.
That ending is so wild.
I love it so much because how else would you end it? If he owns the cops and everything, how else would you end it?
I don't. You'd have to give me a little bit more time. I feel like they had a little bit of time to come up with the ending, but that was insane.
It was crazy. It was crazy. I do like how the new one has like the rich guy has the cops in his pocket again. Like I think that it has to be like that because it could be solved way too easily if the cops are good.
I love when he steals the boat and the ex-boyfriend cop is like, no, 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 you give it back. He's like, okay, you can have it for 2 hours. And when he's trying to explode it, but he has to like point it directly at it. He's like, why is this not working? It was really funny.
I love the line too. And it's such a stupid line, dude, but it's so fun. He goes, "Don't put a scratch on it." And Jake Gyllenhaal goes, "A scratch? It's in the fucking water. How am I going to get a scratch on it?"
Yeah, no, it's good. Jake was so great in that movie. So they all just blast him with shotguns, and then they start hiding the shotguns. And somehow the cops heard this or were called. I don't really understand who called the cops or how they showed up.
I think
But
Clay called the cops.
Dr. Clay, maybe. But I don't know. Then why? I mean, her uncle probably drove her there, and she sort of maybe knew what was happening. Where did they hide the shotguns in the end? Who knows? Anyway, cops show up. They're like, "What? All right, someone explain what happened here." I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. Tinker, which this is the first time I've heard his name in the movie, but is the fat guy. Tinker, did you hear anything? I got smashed by a polar bear.
It's so great, dude.
But
I don't
then
know.
they all start chuckling like it's the end of a fucking 1970s sitcom.
The punchline.
They just murdered a man in cold blood almost. It was
Yeah.
self-defense a little bit, but they kept shooting.
Yeah, I mean, after the first shot with the shotgun, I don't.
He still had a gun. You got to put him down.
Yeah, I don't think. I don't think there's a difference between one shot or five. But, dude, I loved it. I loved it so much. But you're right. Like in the vicinity of where the cops were, like how did they not hear 5 shotguns go off? And then they're like, "Well, what happened here?"
Yeah, what happened here? As he's just got bullet holes riddled in his body. All right, someone should explain this. Yeah, it's crazy. But then it ends with a skinny dipping scene, and I'm like, wait, who's on the shore? It's like, oh, they brought the blind guy, which is why they're skinny dipping in front of him because they're not. I guess they're not worried about that. But
No, that's not.
watch
That's
it again.
But he's at the bar singing. They intercut it.
I don't. Yeah, I think the scenes took place at different times.
Well, I was actually shocked that they ended the movie like that because I was like, oh, so they're not going to give you like he's at the bar. I guess he's just with the girl, and that's just the way it is. And you're absolutely right. The beginning of Roadhouse is so much stronger than the ending, and it almost feels like they got a different writer, or the writer had a mental breakdown halfway through because they were like, "This is a whole different movie now."
I actually even think the way him stalking them in the house was amazing too. I just think it like some slight tweaking on the ending, like a little bit more well thought out. I mean, but I also have the same problem with the new one. Like the new one is a lot of fun throughout with like some weird stuff in. Like I feel like it probably was cut weird. You know what I mean? Like
It was cut. It was cut weird. It was cut. It almost felt like a student film at some like points of it. But what's so amazing to me is that at the end of the movie, and I'm talking about the Jake Gyllenhaal, the new one now, Roadhouse 2024. At the end of the movie, Conor McGregor fucking snaps the neck of the main antagonist.
yeah, man, I don't know what to tell you about that. Like,
And then lives? He gets stabbed like 9 times with like wooden stakes all throughout his chest. But then at the end credits, he lives. Did you see that?
Connor?
Yeah,
He lived?
he lives.
I did not see that. I stopped.
So we're introduced with Conor McGregor at the beginning of this movie, and he's sleeping with this Italian woman, and he jumps out the window, and he's stark naked, and he's like, let me get some clothes, and he just robs this guy and burns down this market, right? So that's your
Right.
hint of like he's unhinged. So the way this movie ends with him is that he breaks out of the hospital, lights the hospital on fire, and walks out of the hospital not naked, but with the hospital gown just wide ass open.
Yeah, I did like. I just completely missed that.
Did you watch at least any of the end credits where they have that like that CGI like exploding shit?
Oh yeah, I saw that a little bit. Yeah, that was. I thought that was tacky.
Yeah, it was tacky. It was weird. I didn't like it.
So what's interesting is after this movie, Patrick Swayze was supposed to be in Predator 2, but he was so injured from this film that he instead went on to do Ghost. Which the run in the 80s for Patrick Swayze is so fucking crazy. And I was looking at it, it seems to have ended at Point Break, like 91.
Yeah.
Um, it's also funny too is that I think Dirty Dancing is like probably what he's most known for, and like he did Dirty Dancing, it was a huge hit. So he did this movie, and like they tried to market it similarly, and this movie bombed at the box office, and then like in home video and stream and TV like did great. I was not a big fan of Dirty Dancing, and I thought this movie was great. So it's just kind of odd how that shit works sometimes. But maybe
I've
I'm also
never
not
I've
the
never
target.
seen. Yeah, maybe you're not the target. I've never seen Dirty Dancing. Have you ever seen Ghost?
I have not.
Oh ho ho.
Keep it coming, Swayze.
Feel a double feature coming along. The ending to both movies are crazy. I love Roadhouse, the 80s version. I just thought it had everything that a young man like me would enjoy. But no, I thought it was really good, like smartly written and very clever. And Patrick Swayze is just, I mean, he's usually always likable. Even when he's the villain in Point Break, he's likable. But he's extremely likable in this one, I thought. So 5 out of 5, masterpiece.
It's interesting too. I think I'm at the point in my life, when you get older, the movies you rewatch, I think, are more from your youth, and so like at this point in my life, I'm finding less and less movies where I was like, I'm gonna rewatch that a lot. But both of these movies, I could see myself rewatching because they're just like so fun.
Well, my wife's out of town right now, and if she agreed to watch both of those movies when she gets back tomorrow, I'd be down for it.
Yeah, I think it's because of I think the story on both of them is a little odd in places. The new one more than the old. The old one is just the ending lost me a little bit. But the tone is so fun and the violence is so great that
Yeah.
like the choreography for the old one too is like pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess Jimmy, the guy who played Jimmy, Marshall Artigue, was like a boxer, and so he actually like commented that Swayze was really good too. So like their fights, all of Swayze stuff was really great. Yeah, I just like I don't know. I was actually surprised at how much I liked this movie. So I am glad this movie and the new one. I'm glad. I kind of knew I'd like the Jake G one though. Like I'm pretty on board with everything he does. So
Yeah, you're a Jake G slut.
I should get a shirt made. Thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and we finally watched Roadhouse. Both of them.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched. I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
watched.